Imagine this, a bustling high-end New York restaurant, the kind where shadows dance on velvet ropes and the clink of champagne flutes is a constant melody. Sarah, a waitress who lives by the rules, faces a dilemma. A man radiating an aura of immense wealth, but lacking an I'd wants the restaurant's most expensive vintage. She refuses. He scoffs. He implies, he threatens with his eyes. She stands firm. Little does she know that single act of defiance against the city's most elusive billionaire is about to shatter her ordinary life. Because the next day, the phone rings. It's his lawyer. And nothing will ever be the same. The dinner rush at Oriole, New York, a beacon of sophisticated dining in Midtown Manhattan, was a symphony of controlled chaos. Sarah Miller, a waitress in her late 20s, moved with practiced efficiency through the maze of linen-draped tables. Her life was a carefully balanced equation of rent tuition for her night classes in hospitality management and the ever-present worry for her younger sister's college fund. Every shift was crucial, every tip a small step forward. Oriole's policy was strict. Anyone ordering alcohol who appeared under 40 needed to present valid identification. No exceptions. It was a rule Sarah had never bent, not even for the slick Wall Street types who tried to charm their way past it. Tonight, however, presented a unique challenge. He'd walked in without a reservation, flanked by two men who looked like they could crack walnuts with their bare hands. The man himself was older, perhaps in his late 50s, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that whispered rather than shouted its exorbitant price. His silver hair was swept back, and his eyes, a startling shade of Arctic blue, seemed to miss nothing. He didn't demand a table. He simply expected one, and the intimidated maitre d', Julian, had scrambled to accommodate him in a discreet corner booth. Sarah was assigned his table. "Good evening, sir," she began, offering a menu. "Can I start you with something to drink?" His voice was quiet, yet carried an undeniable authority. A bottle of the Chateau Petrus, 1982. Sarah's internal alarm bells didn't just ring, they clanged. The 82 Petrus was legendary, a collector's item listed on their reserve menu for a staggering $12,000 a bottle. It was the kind of order that made managers sweat and sommeliers sing. It was also an order that absolutely unequivocally required ID if she had any doubt about his age, or even if she didn't, given the price tag and the restaurant's CYA policies around high-value transactions. He looked to be over 40, certainly, but there was something about the situation, the unusual arrival, the sheer audacity of the order, that made her cautious, plus policy was policy. "An excellent choice, sir," Sarah said, her voice calm, despite the sudden thumping in her chest. "May I please see a form of identification?" The man's Arctic blue eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. One of his companions shifted a silent ripple of disapproval. "Identification," he repeated, a hint of amused disbelief in his tone. "Young lady, do you have any idea who I am?" Sarah had faced down arrogance before. "Sir, it's restaurant policy. For any alcoholic beverage, especially one of this caliber, we are required to verify." She offered a polite, unwavering smile. "I'm sure you understand." The man leaned back, a slow, deliberate movement. "I assure you I am well over the legal drinking age, and I haven't carried an ID for personal use in over 2 decades. A thin smile played on his lips. "It tends to be unnecessary." "I understand it might seem that way, sir," Sarah persisted, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks, but holding her ground. "However, the policy is in place for everyone. Without ID, I cannot serve you the wine." The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. Julian, the maitre d', was hovering anxiously nearby, his face pale. Sarah could feel the eyes of other patrons drawn by the subtle shift in atmosphere. "Perhaps," the man said, his voice dropping to a silken threat, "you should consult your manager. I believe he might be more accommodating." "I'm happy to call him over, sir," Sarah replied. "But the policy is set by the establishment, and it's one all our staff adhere to. He will tell you the same thing." One of the bodyguards finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Just serve the man his wine, lady. Don't make this complicated." Sarah stood taller. "I'm sorry, but I can't. Perhaps you'd like to select a non-alcoholic beverage, or I can take your food order." The billionaire stared at her, his expression unreadable. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was more like analytical curiosity, as if she were a particularly stubborn insect under a microscope. After a long moment, he slowly pushed his chair back. "It seems," he said, his voice devoid of warmth, "that Aureole is not the establishment I remember it to be. We'll be dining elsewhere." With that, he rose, his companions falling into step beside him. He didn't look back. As they swept out, leaving a wake of stunned silence and Julian's near apoplectic gasps, Sarah finally let out a shaky breath. She had done the right thing. She had followed the rules. But as she caught Julian's horrified expression, a cold dread began to seep into her. Had she just made the biggest mistake of her life? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of anxiety for Sarah. Julian, once he'd regained his composure, had pulled her aside, his voice a mixture of fear and frustration. "Sarah, do you have any idea who that was?" He hissed, his usual suave demeanor completely gone. "That was Alistair Sterling." Alistair Sterling. The man practically owns half of Manhattan. He could buy this restaurant with the loose change in his pocket and turn it into a private shoe closet if he felt like it. Sarah knew the name, of course. Alistair Sterling was a titan of industry, a reclusive billionaire whose ventures spanned global finance, tech, and real estate. His face rarely appeared in newspapers, preferring a life shrouded in privacy, which explained why she hadn't recognized him. Knowing his identity now only amplified her unease. "He didn't have ID, Julian," Sarah maintained, though her voice trembled slightly. "The policy is clear. What if he wasn't who he said he was? What if it was some kind of elaborate scam? Or what if by some bizarre chance he wasn't of age for a specific reason, despite appearances? We could lose our liquor license. I could lose my job for not following the rules." Julian ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Rules, rules. Sometimes, Sarah, there's discretion. That man dines with mayors, with senators. He probably hasn't been asked for ID since the Nixon administration, but if I make an exception for him, where does it stop?" Sarah argued, her conviction warring with a rising tide of panic. What if something had gone wrong? It would have been my neck on the line. The restaurant owner, Mr. Dubois, a stern Frenchman with an eagle eye for profit margins and restaurant reputation, was not on site that evening. Julian wrung his hands, muttering about having to report the incident, about potential fallout, about the sheer, unadulterated power of a man like Sterling. Sarah tried to focus on her remaining tables, but her smile felt brittle, her movements stiff. Every time the restaurant door opened, she half expected Sterling to return, perhaps with the police, or worse, with a team of lawyers ready to sue her into oblivion. She replayed the encounter in her mind 100 times. Could she have handled it differently? Should she have just poured the damn wine? But each time she came back to the same conclusion. She had followed the protocol she'd been trained to uphold. If the restaurant didn't want its staff to enforce its own rules, then why have them? By the time her shift ended, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones, a heavy cloak woven with threads of worry. The usually vibrant streets of New York felt oppressive as she made her way to the subway, her mind racing. She thought of her sister Lily, whose bright future depended so much on Sarah's steady income. She thought of her own dreams, her ambition to one day manage a place like Oriole, or even own her own small bistro. Had her adherence to a simple rule jeopardized all of it? Sleep offered little respite. She tossed and turned, haunted by arctic blue eyes and the imagined slam of a judge's gavel. The next morning, Sarah was a bundle of nerves. She had a day off, but the thought of what awaited her when she next went into work, or what news Julian might have for her, was terrifying. She tried to distract herself by studying for an upcoming exam, but the words swam before her eyes. Around 11:00 a.m., her phone rang. It was an unknown number, a sleek, corporate-sounding prefix she didn't recognize. Her heart leaped into her throat. This was it. She took a deep breath and answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hello. Is this Miss Sarah Miller?" The voice on the other end was female, crisp, and utterly professional. There was no warmth, only an efficient, no-nonsense tone that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "Yes, this is she." Sarah managed her palm sweating against the cool plastic of her phone. "Ms. Miller, my name is Evelyn Albright. I am legal counsel for Mr. Alistair Sterling." Sarah's stomach plummeted. Legal counsel? This was far worse than just being fired. Was he suing her? Was he suing the restaurant? The silence from the other end of the line stretched, amplifying her fear. "Mr. Sterling has asked me to contact you regarding the incident at Oriole Restaurant last night." Ms. Albright continued, her voice as sharp as a razor. "He was notably displeased with the service, or rather the lack thereof." Sarah closed her eyes. "I understand. I was simply following the restaurant's policy." "Mr. Sterling is not accustomed to being denied, Ms. Miller, nor is he accustomed to being, shall we say, inconvenienced by what he perceives as bureaucratic trivialities, especially when his identity is to anyone with a modicum of awareness self-evident." Each word was a carefully aimed dart. Sarah felt a defensive anger prickle through her fear. "With all due respect, Ms. Albright, his identity was not self-evident to me. I am paid to be a waitress, not to keep track of every billionaire in New York City. My job includes following health and safety regulations, and that includes responsible alcohol service. I did what I was trained to do." Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could hear the faint, almost inaudible hum of what sounded like a high-end office in the background. Then Ms. Albright's tone shifted just a fraction, but enough for Sarah to notice. It was less accusatory, more direct. "Mr. Sterling is a man of particular habits and expectations, Ms. Miller. However, his reasons for contacting you via my office are perhaps not what you immediately assume." Sarah frowned. "They're not?" "No," Ms. Albright said. "Mr. Sterling does not wish to pursue any complaint against you or the restaurant regarding last night's events." A wave of relief so profound washed over Sarah that her knees felt weak. She sank onto the edge of her worn sofa. Oh, thank God. However," Ms. Albright continued, and the relief instantly evaporated, replaced by a new, sharper anxiety. He has instructed me to schedule a meeting between you and him, at his offices, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Sarah's mind reeled. A meeting with Alistair Sterling. After she'd refused him service, what could he possibly want? A meeting, she echoed, bewildered. Why? Mr. Sterling does not typically elaborate on his reasons beforehand, Ms. Miller. He simply expects attendance. His car will collect you from your address at 8:15. Please be ready. And Ms. Miller. Yes, Sarah whispered. Dress professionally. You are, after all, meeting Alistair Sterling. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a warning. The call hadn't brought the lawsuit she feared, but it had delivered something far more unsettling, a summons from one of the most powerful and enigmatic men in the world. And she had no idea if she was walking into a lecture, an elaborate revenge plot, or something else entirely. The car that arrived at precisely 8:15 a.m. was a black, gleaming Bentley so quiet it seemed to materialize out of the city morning mist. The driver, a stoic man in a dark suit, simply held the door open for Sarah, his expression unreadable. The interior was a cocoon of plush leather and polished wood, smelling faintly of wealth and power. As they glided through the Manhattan traffic, Sarah felt like she'd stepped into another world, a far cry from her cramped apartment and noisy subway commutes. Sterling Tower loomed over Midtown, a monument of steel and glass that scraped the sky. It was a symbol of Alistair Sterling's empire, imposing, and to Sarah, utterly intimidating. The lobby was a vast expanse of marble and modern art, hushed and reverent, like a cathedral dedicated to commerce. Albright met her there, her tailored suit and severe bun, perfectly reflecting the building's austere elegance. Ms. Miller, she greeted her handshake, brief and firm. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. They rode a private elevator, a silent, swift ascent that made Sarah's ears pop. The doors opened directly into an office that was less an office and more a sprawling penthouse suite with panoramic views of Central Park. Books lined one entire wall floor to ceiling. Another featured a collection of what looked like museum-quality artifacts. And seated behind a massive mahogany desk silhouetted against the breathtaking cityscape was Alistair Sterling. He looked different in the daylight, without the dim, flattering lighting of Oriel. Older, certainly with lines of fatigue or perhaps stress etched around his eyes. But those Arctic blue eyes were just as piercing, just as analytical. He wasn't smiling. Ms. Miller, he said, his voice the same quiet baritone she remembered. He gestured towards a leather armchair. Please sit. Ms. Albright took a discreet position near the wall, notebook in hand, a silent observer. Sarah sat perching on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She'd chosen her best navy blue blazer and a simple white blouse, hoping to look professional, but she felt like a child playing dress-up in this opulent setting. I trust your journey here was comfortable. Sterling began a formality that did little to ease the tension. Yes, thank you, Mr. Sterling, Sarah replied, her voice a little breathless. He steepled his fingers, studying her. Last night, Ms. Miller, you did something that very few people dare to do. Sarah braced herself. Here it comes, she thought. The lecture, the reprimand. You told me no, he continued. You refused me something I wanted, despite the clear implication of my status. You prioritized a rule, a principle, over expediency and potential personal gain, or indeed over the avoidance of potential personal trouble. Sarah wasn't sure how to respond. "I was just doing my job, sir, following the restaurant's policies." "A great many people are just doing their jobs when they choose to bend rules for men like me." Sterling countered, a hint of cynicism in his voice. "They see a shortcut, an opportunity to curry favor, an easy way to avoid conflict. You did not." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "For years, Ms. Miller, I have been surrounded by sycophants, by people who tell me what they think I want to hear. People who say yes before I've even finished my sentence. It is remarkably unhelpful, and frankly incredibly dull." Sarah blinked, utterly bewildered. This was not the conversation she had anticipated. "I understand you are studying hospitality management," Sterling said, and Sarah realized with a jolt that he must have had her background checked. Of course he had. "Yes, sir. Night classes. And you work at Oriole to fund this, and to support your sister, I believe." "Yes, sir." Her private life laid bare. It felt invasive, yet his tone wasn't accusatory. Sterling leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Miller, I have a proposition for you. It is unconventional, and it has very little to do with your ability to serve wine or your commendable adherence to an arbitrary ID policy." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I am in the process of establishing a new charitable foundation, a significant one. Its aim will be to provide scholarships and mentorship programs for underprivileged young adults seeking careers in the service and hospitality industry. Individuals with talent and drive, but without the means or connections." Sarah's eyes widened. This was unexpected. "The Sterling Foundation for Future Leaders." He announced the name with a quiet pride. "It will require substantial organization, meticulous planning, and most importantly, it will require someone with unimpeachable integrity at its core. Someone who understands the industry from the ground up. Someone who isn't afraid to uphold standards even when it's difficult. Someone who cannot be easily swayed or intimidated." He looked directly at her. "I believe, Ms. Miller, that you might be that person. Last night, you were not just a waitress refusing a drink. You were a person demonstrating a rare and valuable quality backbone. You showed a commitment to principle in the face of significant pressure. That in my world is a commodity far rarer than a 1982 Petrus." Sarah was speechless. Her mind was racing, trying to process the whiplash from fearing a lawsuit to this. "I am looking for an executive administrator for the Foundation's initial setup phase," Sterling continued. "It would involve working closely with me and my team, developing the framework, establishing criteria, liaising with educational institutions, and eventually helping to select the first cohort of recipients. It is a demanding role. The hours will be long, the pressure immense, but the potential to do good to change lives, including your own, is substantial." He named a salary that made Sarah's jaw drop. It was more than triple what she currently earned, a figure that could transform her life, secure Lily's education, and alleviate so many of her worries. "Ms. Albright has a preliminary contract and a non-disclosure agreement for you to review," Sterling said, gesturing towards his lawyer. "Naturally, you should take your time, perhaps consult with your own legal advisor if you wish." He rose, signaling the end of the meeting. "I am not an easy man to work for, Ms. Miller. I demand excellence. I expect unwavering loyalty. And I have little patience for incompetence. But I also reward those who meet my standards." He walked towards the window, gazing out at the city below. "What you did last night, it impressed me. More than you can imagine. In a world of yes men, a no spoken with conviction is a sound I value. He turned back to her. The position is yours if you want it. Think about it. Ms. Albright will be in touch. Sarah stood up, her legs feeling unsteady. Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Surprise is often a precursor to clarity, Ms. Miller. Go home. Consider the offer. Consider what you want for your future. Ms. Albright handed her a thick envelope. My card is inside, Ms. Miller. Please contact me by the end of the week with your decision. Dazed Sarah was escorted back to the Bentley. As the city flashed past her window, she clutched the envelope to her chest. Alistair Sterling, the billionaire she'd defied, hadn't sought revenge. He'd offered her an opportunity beyond her wildest dreams. But it came with a catch, she sensed. Working for a man like Sterling would be a trial by fire. Was she ready to trade her familiar struggles for a high-stakes gamble in a world of unimaginable wealth and power? The principled waitress who just wanted to follow the rules now faced a choice that could redefine her entire existence. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion and intense deliberation for Sarah. The initial shock gave way to a cautious excitement, which was then tempered by a healthy dose of skepticism. Could an offer this good be real? What was the catch? She confided in Lily, her younger sister, whose pragmatic optimism was a welcome contrast to Sarah's own tendency towards anxious overthinking. Wow, Sarah, that's insane, Lily exclaimed over a video call, her eyes wide. Alistair Sterling. From refusing him a drink to this, it's like something out of a movie. That's what worries me, Sarah confessed, pacing her small living room. It feels too much like a movie. What if he's just testing me further? What if this is some elaborate game rich people play? But what if it's not? Lily countered. What if he genuinely saw something in you? You're always so dedicated, Sarah. So honest. Maybe he just recognized that. The salary alone, Mum's medical bills, my tuition, it would change everything. The thought of her mother, whose chronic illness was a constant financial drain, weighed heavily on Sarah. This job could provide her with the best care, alleviate so much stress. And Lily, bright, ambitious Lily, deserved to go to college without worrying about every penny. Sarah knew she couldn't make this decision lightly. The non-disclosure agreement was standard, but intimidating. The preliminary contract was complex. She remembered Ms. Albright's suggestion to consult a legal advisor. Using a small portion of her savings, she found a young, hungry lawyer who specialized in employment contracts. The offer is legitimate from what I can ascertain, the lawyer, Ms. Chen, confirmed after reviewing the documents. Sterling's corporations are vast, but this foundation seems to be a new, genuine initiative. The salary is exceptionally generous for an executive administrator role, even in this city, which suggests he places a high value on this position, or on you specifically. The terms are demanding. Long hours, exclusivity, a strict confidentiality clause, but not unheard of for high-level executive support roles, especially for someone of Sterling's profile. Ms. Chen paused. The only unusual aspect is how you came to his attention. It's unorthodox. But powerful men are often unorthodox. He's essentially headhunting you based on a single brief interaction. It implies he's looking for a very specific set of personal qualities rather than a long resume in foundation management. That resonated with what Sterling himself had said. He mentioned integrity, Sarah recalled. Backbone. Those are qualities you can't easily teach, Ms. Chen mused. If he believes you have them, he might be willing to overlook a lack of direct experience in this specific field, assuming you're a fast learner. Sarah then did her own research. She spent hours online delving into Alistair Sterling's public persona, or rather the lack of one. He was intensely private. There were articles about his business triumphs, his ruthless acquisitions, his almost mythical Midas touch in the financial markets, but very little about his personal life, and even less about any philanthropic endeavors until now. This foundation seemed to be a new direction for him. She found a few older, obscure articles that hinted at a different side of Sterling, a past that wasn't all boardroom battles. One piece, a 20-year-old profile from a long-defunct financial magazine, mentioned his own humble beginnings, a scholarship that had given him his first break. It was a small detail, almost a footnote, but it stuck with Sarah. Could this foundation be his way of paying it forward? A desire to give others the same chance he once had. It made him seem, if not relatable, then at least a little more human. Her thoughts also returned to Oriole. She called Julian, explaining vaguely that she'd had a follow-up from Sterling's office, but not a complaint. Thank heavens, Julian breathed relieved. I spoke to Mr. Dubois. He was concerned, shall we say. But if Sterling isn't planning to, buy the block just to tear us down, then we can all breathe again. Are you all right, Sarah? He didn't threaten you, did he? No, Julian, nothing like that, Sarah said, not ready to reveal the job offer. He was surprisingly understanding in his own way. Well, whatever you did or didn't do, try not to antagonize any more multi-billionaires this week, eh? Sarah promised she'd try. The thought of telling Mr. Dubois she was leaving, especially after the Sterling incident, was daunting, but the opportunity before her was too significant to ignore. She thought back to Sterling's office, the quiet power he exuded. He was right. He wouldn't be an easy man to work for. He would push her, test her. The pressure would be immense. But wasn't that what she wanted, ultimately? To be challenged, to grow, to make a difference. Her hospitality management studies had taught her about creating exceptional experiences, about precision, about dedication. This was that, on an entirely different scale. The most compelling factor, however, wasn't just the money or the prestige. It was the mission of the foundation itself. To help young people like her, like Lily. People who had the talent, but lacked the resources. The idea of being instrumental in building something that could genuinely change lives resonated deeply with Sarah's own values. It was a purpose. By the end of the week, after countless sleepless hours, numerous cups of coffee and endless mental pro and con lists, Sarah made her decision. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on Ms. Albright's card. Ms. Albright, this is Sarah Miller. Her voice was steady, resolute. Regarding Mr. Sterling's offer, I accept. There was a brief pause on the other end. Excellent, Ms. Miller. Mr. Sterling will be pleased. We will send over the finalized contract and onboarding materials immediately. Your start date will be Monday week. Welcome to Sterling Enterprises. As Sarah hung up, a wave of both exhilaration and trepidation washed over her. She had stepped off a precipice. There was no going back now. Her life as she knew it was about to change irrevocably. She just hoped she was ready for the fall, or perhaps the flight. Sarah's first few weeks at Sterling Enterprises were like being thrown into the deep end of a very cold, very fast-moving river. The opulence of Sterling Tower was initially overwhelming, a stark contrast to the familiar chaos of Oriole. Her new office, while not as grand as Sterling's, was spacious and modern, with a view that stretched across the city, a constant reminder of the dizzying heights she had reached. Alistair Sterling as a boss was exactly as he'd promised, demanding, exacting, and possessing an almost supernatural attention to detail. He expected her to anticipate his needs, to be 10 steps ahead, to absorb complex information at lightning speed. Meetings were rapid-fire decisions, made with swift, incisive clarity. There was no room for error, no patience for excuses. "Ms. Miller," he'd said during their first official Foundation meeting, his Arctic blue eyes fixed on her. "This Foundation is not a vanity project. It is an investment in human potential. I expect it to be run with the same rigor and efficiency as any of my commercial ventures. Your role is to build the engine that will drive it." Sarah poured herself into the work. The learning curve was steep. She was tasked with everything from drafting policy documents and researching potential partner institutions to liaising with legal and financial teams to ensure the Foundation's structure was sound. She organized Sterling's schedule for Foundation-related matters, prepared detailed briefings, and sat in on meetings with academics, community leaders, and even a few bewildered-looking university deans who weren't used to Sterling's direct, often blunt approach. Albright initially, a somewhat intimidating presence, became an unexpected source of guidance. While always professional, she offered Sarah quiet advice on navigating Sterling's expectations and the intricate corporate culture of his empire. "Mr. Sterling values initiative, Miss Miller," she'd said one afternoon, "but he despises uninformed initiative. Research, verify, then act, and never assume." Sarah quickly learned that Sterling's tests were not always overt. Sometimes it was an offhand comment, a seemingly minor task designed to see how she would react, how resourceful she could be. One day he asked her for a comparative analysis of 3 obscure vocational training programs in underserved communities, expecting it by end of day, a task that required sifting through mountains of data and making numerous calls. She delivered it comprehensive and concise, 5 minutes before deadline, earning a rare, almost imperceptible nod of approval. The most challenging aspect was the sheer weight of responsibility. The Foundation was starting with an initial endowment that made Sarah's head spin. Hundreds of millions of dollars. The thought that she was instrumental in deciding how this vast sum would be deployed to help others was both exhilarating and terrifying. She often worked late, fueled by coffee, and a growing sense of purpose, her small apartment feeling more like a place to briefly recharge than a home. There were moments of doubt, of course. Moments when the pressure felt crushing, when Sterling's critiques felt harsh, when she missed the simple camaraderie of the staff at Oriole. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, where a carefully planned presentation had been dismantled by Sterling point by point, Sarah found herself staring out her office window, tears welling in her eyes. Was she out of her depth? Had she made a mistake? Just then, her private line buzzed. It was Sterling. "Miller." His voice was abrupt. "That data point on youth unemployment in the Bronx. The source felt thin. Double-check it. Cross-reference with the Department of Labor stats I sent you last week. I need absolute certainty." Sarah's shoulders slumped. He hadn't missed a thing. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Right away." She pushed aside her self-pity and dove back into the figures. An hour later, she found it. A slight discrepancy, a misinterpretation in the report she'd been given by an external consultant. It wasn't a huge error, but it was enough to matter. She corrected it, reran the projections, and sent the updated brief to Sterling. His reply came minutes later, a single line. "Better. Precision matters, Miller. Always." It wasn't praise, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement. And in Sterling's world, that was significant. She realized then that his critiques weren't personal. They were about upholding a standard of excellence. He was pushing her, yes, but he was also, in his own way, teaching her. One afternoon, Ms. Albright stopped by Sarah's office. "Mr. Sterling asked me to give you this," she said, handing Sarah an invitation. It was for a small, private dinner party Sterling was hosting for a few key figures involved in the Foundation's preliminary advisory board. "He specifically requested your attendance." Sarah was surprised. She was still just the executive administrator, albeit a very busy one. To be included in such a gathering felt like a significant step. The dinner was held in a private room at a different, equally exclusive restaurant, one where Sterling was clearly a regular, and no one dared ask for his ID. Sarah, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress she'd bought with her first paycheck, felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Yet this time, she was an insider. Throughout the evening, she listened more than she spoke, absorbing the conversations, observing Sterling as he engaged with influential academics and philanthropists. He was charming when he wanted to be persuasive, his arguments backed by an astonishing breadth of knowledge. He introduced Sarah to each guest not as his assistant, but as Ms. Miller, the organizational driving force behind the Foundation. Towards the end of the evening, as guests were departing, Sterling approached Sarah. "You were quiet tonight, Ms. Miller." "I was learning Mr. Sterling," she replied. "It was, insightful." He regarded her for a moment. The ability to listen is as important as the ability to speak. Many forget that. He then said something that caught her completely off guard. "My first business venture, a small tech startup, failed miserably. I lost everything. It was a hard lesson in overconfidence and under-preparation." Sarah was stunned by this rare glimpse of vulnerability. I didn't know that, sir." "Few do," he said, a wry twist to his lips. "Failure can be a powerful teacher, Ms. Miller, if you allow it to be. It taught me the importance of due diligence, of not taking anything for granted. It also taught me that sometimes the people who will stand by you when things are tough, who will tell you the hard truths, are the most valuable assets you can have." He looked at her pointedly. "That day at Oriole, you weren't afraid to deliver an unwelcome truth, regardless of the consequences to yourself. That is why you are here." It was the closest he'd ever come to explaining his decision so personally, and in that moment, Sarah understood. The ID incident wasn't just about a rule, it was a litmus test of character. He hadn't just been looking for an employee. He'd been looking for someone he could perhaps trust, someone who wouldn't just say yes. As she left the restaurant that night, Sarah felt a newfound sense of confidence. The path ahead was still challenging, but she no longer felt like an imposter. She had earned her place. Alistair Sterling had seen something in her, and she was determined not to let him or herself down. The Foundation was taking shape, and she was an integral part of it. The waitress who once worried about her next paycheck was now helping to steward a legacy. Months blurred into a relentless, exhilarating drive towards a singular goal, the official launch of the Sterling Foundation for future leaders. Sarah lived and breathed the Foundation. Her life became a meticulously organized tapestry of spreadsheets, presentations, outreach programs, and an endless stream of decisions both minor and monumental. She worked side by side with Sterling, their professional rhythm becoming surprisingly harmonious. He was still demanding, still pushed her to her limits, but a mutual respect had undeniably formed. He trusted her judgment, increasingly deferring to her on operational matters and the nuances of program development. Sarah, in turn, learned to navigate his intense personality, to understand his vision, and to translate his grand ideas into actionable realities. She'd overseen the design of the Foundation's website, the crafting of its mission statement, the establishment of a rigorous and fair application process for the scholarships, and the development of a mentorship program that would pair seasoned industry veterans with the young recipients. She'd even, with Sterling's surprising blessing, insisted on a small clause in the selection criteria that subtly favored candidates who demonstrated resilience in overcoming adversity, a nod to her own journey, and perhaps to Sterling's unspoken past. The day of the launch arrived a crisp autumn afternoon. The event was held not in a stuffy corporate hall, but in a beautifully restored community arts center in a revitalized Brooklyn neighborhood, a deliberate choice championed by Sarah to make the Foundation feel accessible and grounded. The room was filled with educators, community leaders, prospective students, a handful of discreetly present city officials, and a surprisingly large contingent of press. Sarah, standing backstage, felt a tremor of nerves far exceeding anything she'd felt at Oriole, or even in Sterling's imposing office. She was scheduled to give a brief introductory speech before Sterling himself took the stage. She smoothed down her charcoal grey suit, a far cry from her waitress uniform, and took a deep breath. Ms. Albright gave her an encouraging nod. "You'll be wonderful, Sarah. You built this alongside him." When her name was called, Sarah walked onto the stage, her heart pounding. She looked out at the expectant faces, and for a moment she saw herself among them, young hopeful needing a chance. "Good afternoon, everyone." She began, her voice clearer and stronger than she expected. "My name is Sarah Miller, and I am the Executive Director of the Sterling Foundation for Future Leaders." She paused, allowing the title one Sterling had insisted upon a few weeks prior to sink in. "We are here today to launch not just an organization, but a promise to invest in talent, to nurture ambition, and to provide pathways to success for those who have the drive, but perhaps not yet the means." She spoke eloquently about the Foundation's mission, her passion evident in every word. She shared her own belief in the transformative power of opportunity, her voice resonating with sincerity. When she finished, there was a warm, sustained applause. Then it was Alistair Sterling's turn. He walked to the podium, and for the first time, Sarah saw not the intimidating billionaire or the exacting boss, but a man genuinely moved by the occasion. He spoke of his belief in the next generation, of the importance of giving back. He didn't mention his own past hardships, but Sarah saw a flicker of it in his eyes when he talked about the doors that education and opportunity could open. He concluded, "This foundation is not about charity in the traditional sense. It is about empowerment. It is about recognizing that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And it is about finding those individuals who, with the right support, will go on to become leaders in their own right." He then turned to Sarah, who was standing to the side of the stage. "And none of this would have been possible without the tireless dedication, unwavering integrity, and extraordinary vision of our Executive Director, Ms. Sarah Miller. She is the heart of this foundation." The applause was thunderous. Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck, but also an immense sense of pride. After the speeches, as they mingled with guests and the first group of scholarship hopefuls, a young woman approached Sarah, her eyes shining. "Miller, I just wanted to say, thank you. Listening to you, knowing you helped build this, it gives people like me so much hope." Later that evening, after the last guest had departed and the hall was quiet, Sarah and Sterling stood amidst the remnants of the celebration. "Well, Miller," Sterling said, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "We did it." "We did, Mr. Sterling," Sarah agreed, a tired but contented smile on her own. "You know," he mused, looking around the room, "when you refused to serve me that wine at Aureole, I was, to put it mildly, irritated. I genuinely thought you were just being obstinate." Sarah chuckled. "I genuinely thought I was about to be fired." "Life has a funny way of working out," Sterling said. "You were right to stand your ground. That simple act of integrity, it set all of this in motion. It reminded me of what truly matters beyond the balance sheets and stock prices." He looked at her directly. "You reminded me of the kind of person I once aspired to be before life became more complicated." It was a profound admission, one that spoke volumes about the journey they had both been on. "The foundation isn't just for them, Ms. Miller," he added quietly. "Perhaps it's for me, too." Sarah understood. In the months and years that followed, the Sterling Foundation for Future Leaders flourished under Sarah's guidance and Sterling's patronage. It changed countless lives, providing not just financial aid, but genuine mentorship and support. Sarah became a respected figure in the philanthropic community, known for her compassionate leadership and her unwavering commitment to the Foundation's mission. She never forgot her roots, often sharing her own story to inspire the students they helped. She still occasionally thought about that fateful night at Aureole. A single moment, a single decision to uphold a rule had irrevocably altered the course of her life, leading her to a destiny she could never have imagined. She had faced a billionaire and hadn't backed down, and in doing so had not only secured her own future, but had helped to forge a brighter future for many others. The waitress who simply did her job had become a leader, proving that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as the most challenging confrontations. And Alistair Sterling, the reclusive billionaire, found that in giving others a chance, he had perhaps found a measure of redemption and purpose himself. Their unlikely partnership, born from a moment of defiance, had created a legacy of hope. Sarah's incredible journey from a rule-abiding waitress at Aureole to the executive director of a major philanthropic foundation shows us the profound impact of integrity and standing by your principles, even when faced with immense pressure. Who knew that refusing to serve a billionaire a $12,000 bottle of wine without an ID could lead to such an extraordinary destiny? It's a testament to the idea that doing the right thing can unlock doors you never even knew existed. What did you think of Sarah's decision? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected twists and inspiring outcomes, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic and thought-provoking storytelling. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. What's the bravest decision you've ever made?